You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
It is Sons of the Shoe, Spencer German with you, and we roll on into another episode and another week of college football that actually doesn't include the Buckeyes this weekend. They have a bye week. Something that I was actually a little bit worried about, or actually I thought it was a good thing a week ago before the Oregon game, because I was like, oh, hey, you're not going to have what Alabama just did, which was you win a big game, and then on the other side, maybe you let up a little bit because it's an inferior opponent, it's not Oregon, it's not the same stage, and instead I actually think it's a bad thing, because after that loss on Saturday, I would have rather they play immediately this week and allow us to kind of wipe that loss. I mean, we're never going to forget, but wipe as much as we can that loss from our memory. Guys, we are still a relatively new podcast. I want to remind you to like, subscribe, review. That's one of the big ones. Review the podcast, because if you review the podcast, it shows up more in people's timelines as recommended podcasts, people that are Ohio State fans that maybe don't follow the show just yet. We need your support. We need your help. And we appreciate it, as always, those of you who join us via the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel or any of the other avenues where you can find the show, the Odyssey app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Again, I reiterate, Apple Podcasts. We appreciate you guys jumping on in however you participate in the show. So how are we feeling? Because I have calmed down since Saturday night. If you couldn't tell in the live show that we did, or if you caught it after the fact, I was pretty fired up. And I'm still fired up about certain things and certain points from that game. I want to revisit a few things because there are some parts of this that I think are important for me to rehash and take away as positives from this game. But I also do think there's still some things that stand out as like problems for this team, problems for the Buckeyes, and reasons why I'm still frustrated. And I guess, I mean, I don't know. Do we want to start positive? Do we want to start negative? I think that's the kind of the question here, because I am still pretty upset just about Ryan Day in general. And it's why, like the title of this episode, Ryan Day has the hottest seat in college football. I think that's 100% true. But I'll get to that coming up, because because I said I'm calmed down, I'm going to start with the positives. I have had a chance to do some self-reflection, look back on this game a little bit. And the first thing I'm going to say is that, guys, I think we're all getting used to this 12-team playoff era where one loss doesn't just completely sink your season entirely. And because of that, I think like I was emotional on Saturday, rightfully so. I mean, it was right after the game, right? I felt like, and maybe in many ways, it was like a player having played in that game just moments ago, and you show up and there's a microphone in your face and the camera, and you got to react in real time. And so the emotions are flowing. I was upset as an Ohio State fan. I was upset. I thought they were going to win that game. I thought that they got exploited, and I was frustrated. But I am still getting used to the idea that one loss doesn't sink your season. And when the 8 people came out, we, I think, saw that was abundantly clear. Just this idea that, like, okay, they lost that game, but they only dropped, one spot or 2 spots to number 4. They're still one of the highest ranked teams in the country, and there's still a chance for them to kind of dig themselves out and get back in that conversation. I mean, 2 weeks from now, a little over 2 weeks from now, when they play Penn State, it's an opportunity where if they go win that game, okay, now they're back in the top 3 most likely. I know the college football playoff, I think rankings come out, I think actually at the week after that Penn State game. So it'll be a chance for Ohio State to certainly reestablish themselves. But on the other hand, like, that game is a little bit nerve-wracking, because if you lose that game, now you're talking about 2 losses, and your strength of schedule in terms of out of conference is complete shit. So this team has a lot sort of still on their plate. They still have a lot to figure out, and they certainly can still get back in the playoff picture, or they're certainly still in the playoff picture with a chance to still make some noise and achieve everything they wanted to achieve. And I think I needed to kind of just reflect on that a little bit over the last couple of days since the game, and remember, like, it's a different era. One loss doesn't sink your season. And in some ways, I'll say this, maybe the one thing that made me feel better this week about that loss was just the idea that I got the one thing I was worried about going into this year, as we talked about Oregon, and as we talked about the idea that maybe they play multiple times, like week 6, and then in a Big Ten, or week 7, and then in a Big Ten championship, and then maybe even playing a third time in the college football playoff. I kept kind of coming back to this idea that, like, it is hard to beat a team multiple times. And so if they lost the game 1, maybe this sets the stage for, you make a run, get to the Big Ten championship, and then you play them again, and you're able to kind of exact some revenge and learn something from that game. I think there's something to be said for that. So that makes me feel a little bit better, because I was nervous about that coming into the season. That now you played them so close, and it really came down to like 1 or 2 plays here or there. Okay, maybe things go differently the next time around, and so that was one positive I took away. I also do think too, like, because the system now affords you an opportunity to, experience some adversity and learn from it. And I think that's valuable for this team as well, especially given that I think they got exposed in certain ways where, and it's reminiscent of the last time they won a national championship, 2014 season, you lose to Virginia Tech, they still climbed their way back into the picture and then make the playoff and then go on to win the title. Like, now you have more wiggle room to, like, okay, we lost a game early, we had to face some adversity, we had to learn some things, we had to look in the mirror, and now we can go and still chase that championship. It doesn't sink your season. It allows you an opportunity to learn in season without it being like, okay, your season's over, that's it, you're done. And so I think there's value in that. And so I think in real time, as Ohio State fans, we are experiencing and seeing the value of the 12-team playoff, just from a standpoint of, yes, we want the Buckeyes to be perfect, we want them to win every game, we want to blow everybody out. That's not going to always happen, but now they because they maybe lose 1 or 2 games here or there to a Michigan, which we hope never happens again, but of course that's a great rivalry, so it will, or to a Penn State, or to an Oregon, like we saw. There's still a chance for you to do what you want to do and still prove that you're one of the best teams in this country, and then have a shot at the title at the end. So I've since reflected and realized that I like that about this new system. The other thing that I want to highlight, I was harsh on Will Howard because of the end of the game situation. And I don't want to, and I will say this, I don't know that I was totally unfair, because I do think that on some level, like, people will look back, and the one thing that they're going to remember from that game in regards to Will Howard, is that end of the game sequence where they have the 6 seconds, he slides down in field goal range, thinking, okay, we just put ourselves in a position to potentially win this thing, and with a field goal, not realizing that time had expired. And I understand where that's frustrating. Obviously, the Dan Lanning, which we'll get to, the Dan Lanning manipulating the rule book a little bit by putting 12 men on the field. I'm guessing Will sort of imagined he had more time because they've reset the clock, and they obviously didn't. But yeah, like that was a key moment in that game. And we are going to look back and remember that being sort of like the, oh no, for Will Howard. But in the same breath, like, guys, I walked away, as I've since reflected, feeling like Will Howard checked the boxes. I was one of the harshest critics of Will Howard through the first 4 games of the season. I kept saying, like, I just need to see more. I need to see it on a certain stage. I need to know that he can deliver in these big moments. And guys, like, he did that, I thought, in spades up until the final few seconds. 28 of 35, 326 yards and 2 touchdowns against one of the best teams in the country. Like, that is the thing I was waiting to see. And we flat out saw it in this game, on a national stage, bright light shining down on you, whole 9 yards. He was brilliant. He was great. He was a really, really good quarterback. And so I do think he answered the bell in regards to the questions of, can he do it for this team on that stage? Is he the quarterback for this team that can essentially take, like, that you feel confident on the biggest stages, he's going to take you to he can lead you to a national championship. Like, that was the thing we were waiting to see from Will. And I think he showed us that without question in this game against Oregon. So I am I'm not going to say I'm done being critical of Will Howard because there might be games where he makes mistakes and we have to look back and be like, well, this wasn't good enough for the Ohio State standard. But in that game, he lived up to the Ohio State standard. He's checked all the boxes for me now. And I do have confidence that he can be the quarterback that leads this team to a national championship. Now, I have questions about other areas, which I'm going to get to here in a second. But I do think that he proved he is the quarterback this year that can take this team to where it needs to go with all the talent that's around him. He was great. Aside from the last couple seconds, which I know is the thing people are going to remember most, he was great. And so I need to give him his flowers now and point out the fact that I maybe didn't highlight that enough after the game. I feel confident in Will Howard now, and I'm not necessarily uneasy about him going into future games and especially big games when they're going to need him most. Now, the big part of this, and the reason why I'm still upset about this loss as a whole, is that I do think Oregon exposed you in certain areas. And I think most notably they exposed you maybe not so much. I mean, the offensive line's going to have issues because Josh Simmons is done for the year. At least as far as Ryan Day has alluded to, he's done for the year. And that is your starting left tackle, the guy that you were obviously counting on to lead this group, or not only him, because you obviously thrown in there. You obviously have Donovan Jackson next to him, and the left side of this offensive line was supposed to be sort of the strength of this group, and I think they had shown that, especially in recent weeks, that they were the dominant group that you were expecting. And you were seeing some good things from them, but now you turn it over to Zen Michalowski, and now I'm worried about that group a little bit more because you now have an injury problem. But even still, like maybe there were some weaknesses there that we saw in the Oregon game a little bit, but it wasn't such a glaring concern that at least in that game specifically. I think I think what was exposed though was the defense, and particularly the defensive front. Because listen, we can say I was harsh on the secondary, and for good reason. They played terrible, and Denzel Burke, as a guy that's supposed to be a potential first round pick and one of the top corners in this next NFL class, he was god awful. I mean, that group as a whole needs to play better, especially if they're going to go around touting themselves as the best in America. We have the best secondary group in America. Okay, well then frankly, fucking prove it. Like, you got to be better than what they were in that game. But I will say this, in their defense, to an extent, and it's a small percentage of the equation here, not a small percentage, but it is a percentage of the equation here, not the full. Like, you could still play better, but like, part of being a defensive back is you need a defensive line that makes a quarterback's life a little bit difficult, so that, because if you have to defend a guy for 15 seconds downfield, and I'm exaggerating there a little bit, but like, beyond like 6 to 10 seconds, like that's where you start to have problems, and that's where you do start to get exposed as a secondary. I don't care how good you are, you're not going to hang with a guy for that long when you're just running around the field. So I think the defensive line is a problem. Like, this group came back, veteran group. I was so excited about Jack Sawyer, guy who I thought flashed in I always forget if it was the damn Peach Bowl. I think it was the Cotton Bowl. He flashed last year in the bowl game, and I thought, like, okay, he's finally turning that corner. He's going to come back next year, have a really big year as an elite pass rusher for Ohio State, go down in history with the Chase Youngs and the Bosa brothers and all these different guys. And where was he? Felt like he was pretty much non-existent in this game, and I just I didn't feel like there was a lot of good there. They had 0 sacks. This defense did as a group. And JT Tuimoloau, like, he's a great player, and he does more than just rush the passer, and that's kind of the point here. Like, I'm not expecting him to just like rack up every single sack. Like, he plays the run very well, and he does some good things, and he was the one guy who got any sort of quarterback hits on Dylan Gabriel, so that's great. But like, I need these guys to show up in those moments, and I thought they were exposed as a line that can't really generate a lot of pressure, and therefore that left the defense, I think, also in a bit of a pickle. And then I think along those lines, like, Jim Knowles had some problems because he didn't start bringing the pressures early enough. And when he did finally start bringing the pressure, it was, it didn't matter. Then Dylan Gabriel was confident he was picking apart the secondary. So
they got to be better. I think up front, the front four need to be able to generate pressure on their own more often. I understand it's not going to be every single play and every single snap, but what you need is you need to do a little bit better of being able to operate on your own as a group of four. And then on top of that, Jim Knowles complimenting those guys with blitzes, timely blitzes, using the blitz at the right time. So I'm worried about this defense moving forward. Like what we saw last Saturday was not a defense that I think is ready to win a national championship and beat a Georgia or an Alabama or I don't know, a Texas, because Texas is number one in the country right now. To beat those teams, the defense is going to have to be better. On top of the fact that, like, yeah, like there's like they can't shoot themselves in the foot on both sides of the ball, and they have to be more aware of certain situations like they were at the end of the game. But like that defense feels like a real problem now. And I am like I've turned the magnifying glass, the microscope that I had on Will Howard. I have turned that to the defense wholly. Like they have a lot to prove to me between now and Penn State. They have a lot to prove to me between now and Michigan. And frankly, they have a lot to prove to me between now and a Big Ten championship / whatever awaits them on the other side, if it's a run in the college football playoff or not. So that is my biggest concern for this team moving forward. What is your biggest concern for the Buckeyes moving forward after the loss to Oregon? What are the silver linings that you're taking away from this game? And are you feeling better about Will Howard, or are you totally confident that Will Howard's the right guy for this team at quarterback moving forward? Let us know at the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel in the comment section. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Spencito_. Let's take a break. When we get back, we can't avoid the elephant in the room any longer. I have raised the hot seat-o-meter, or the hot seat-ometer. Sorry, I always do o-meter like it's an Irish bar or something like that. On Ryan Day, how long of a leash does he get with his seat being as hot as it is? And the fact that he is now 1-7 against top 5 teams during his coaching tenure with the Buckeyes. We'll talk about it next, but keep it locked real quick. Here's a word from our sponsor.